Have you ever wondered how a dynasty that ruled for more than 300 years could fall so dramatically? This is the tale of the Romanovs, the family that held the reins of Russia from the year 1613, shaping its destiny for more than 3 centuries. Their rule, a saga of power, wealth and influence, made the Romanovs one of the most prominent families in European history. From the icy expanses of Siberia to the grand halls of the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg, their reign touched every corner of the vast Russian Empire. The Romanovs were not just rulers, they were the embodiment of Russia's identity, the living symbols of its imperial might, and the bearers of its future. Yet amidst this grandeur and power, the seeds of their downfall were sown. But as they say, all good things must come to an end, and for the Romanovs that end was tragic and swift. The final Tsar of Russia, Nicholas II, ascended the throne in 1894. Little did he know, he would be the last of the Romanovs. During his reign, he was faced with a series of challenges, both political and personal, that would ultimately shape the destiny of his dynasty and Russia. Nicholas II was a man of deep religious conviction and a strong sense of duty. However, his decisions were often influenced more by his personal beliefs than by the political realities of his time. His adherence to autocracy, his reluctance to share power, and his failure to address the country's economic problems led to growing discontent among the Russian people. His decision to lead the Russian army personally during World War I, despite his lack of military experience, only exacerbated the situation. His absence from the capital created a power vacuum which was filled by his wife Alexandra and the infamous Rasputin. This further alienated the Russian people and eroded the authority of the Tsar. His decision set the stage for the revolution that was to come. The turn of the 20th century was a time of change, not just in Russia, but around the world. As the calendar pages flipped over to the 1900s, Russia found itself in a state of transformation. The nation, once primarily agrarian, was rapidly industrializing, and with this shift came a host of socio-economic changes. Cities swelled with workers drawn to factories like moths to a flame, creating a new urban proletariat, but also leading to overcrowded living conditions and a rising tide of discontent. This discontent wasn't just confined to the working class. The intelligentsia, Russia's educated elite, were also growing restless. They observed the widening gap between the rich and the poor, the archaic autocracy of the Tsar, and the absence of basic civil liberties. And they began to question, to debate, to dream of a different Russia. Such dreams were fueled by new ideologies that were gaining traction. Chief among these was socialism, an ideology that promised equality and justice for all. The writings of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels resonated with many, their words igniting sparks of hope in the hearts of the oppressed and the disillusioned. These sparks would soon fan into the flames of revolution. But what of the Tsar? Nicholas II, the last Romanov ruler, was a man out of sync with his time. While the world around him was changing, he clung stubbornly to the old ways, to the divine right of kings. His refusal to share power, to heed the voices of his people, only served to amplify their discontent. As the 20th century dawned, the stage was set. The socio-economic changes, the political unrest, the new ideologies, the disillusionment with the Tsar, all these were threads woven into a tapestry of tension and turmoil. When viewed in retrospect, it's clear to see how these seeds of revolution were sown. These changes, coupled with the Tsar's inability to adapt, created a perfect storm for a revolution. In 1917, the storm broke, the Russian Revolution had begun. It was a time of social and political upheaval, a time when the very fabric of Russian society was torn apart and rewoven into something new, something revolutionary. The year kicked off with the February Revolution, a mass protest movement sparked by food shortages and widespread dissatisfaction with the war effort. The people had had enough. They took to the streets in droves, demanding change. The Russian Empire, once thought invincible, was teetering on the brink of collapse. The unrest reached a boiling point when soldiers called upon to quell the protests, instead sided with the revolutionaries. This was a significant turning point, a clear sign that the old order was crumbling. Nicholas II, the last Tsar of Russia, had no choice but to abdicate. The centuries-old Romanov Dynasty had come to an abrupt end, but the revolution was far from over. The provisional government that took over was weak and ineffective, unable to meet the demands of the people or to bring an end to the war. Russia was still in turmoil, still searching for a path forward. Then in October, another revolution began. This time, it was led by the Bolsheviks, a radical socialist party under the leadership of Vladimir Lenin. They promised peace, land, and bread, a stark contrast to the continued war and economic hardship under the provisional government. The Bolsheviks seized power in a nearly bloodless coup, marking the start of a new era in Russian history. But with every end, there is a beginning. With the fall of the Romanov Dynasty, Russia embarked on a new journey, one that would take it down the path of socialism and ultimately, communism. The Romanov Dynasty had fallen, but what would come next? The stage was set for a new chapter in the story of Russia, a chapter filled with uncertainty, conflict, and change. The Romanovs' reign ended not with a peaceful transition of power, but with a brutal execution. This chilling event took place in the early hours of July 17, 1918, in the basement of a house in Yekaterinburg, Russia, where Tsar Nicholas II, his wife Alexandra and their 5 children were held captive. The order of execution came directly from the Ural Soviet of Workers' Deputies, a grim reflection of the escalating turmoil within the nation. The last Tsar of Russia, Nicholas II, had been a symbol of the old order, a poignant reminder of the autocratic rule that had held sway over Russia for centuries. His wife Alexandra was viewed with suspicion due to her German heritage and the influence she held over the weak-willed Tsar. Their children, the Grand Duchesses Olga, Tatiana, Maria, Anastasia, and the young Tsarevich Alexei, were innocent pawns in this political maelstrom. The execution was swift and brutal. The family, their physician, and 3 servants were herded into a small room under the pretext of posing for a photograph. Instead, they were met with a hail of bullets from a firing squad, an event that shook the world and marked the definitive end of the Romanov dynasty. The impact of this grim event reverberated far beyond Russia's borders. The execution of an entire imperial family was a shocking act that signaled the ruthless determination of the Bolsheviks to wipe out all traces of the old regime. It served as a stark warning to other ruling families and aristocracies across Europe, who were witnessing the rise of socialist and communist ideologies. In the aftermath of the execution, the Romanovs became symbols of the old world, brutally swept aside by the new order. Their tragic end echoed the tumultuous changes taking place across the globe as empires crumbled and new nations rose from their ashes. Indeed, the execution of the Romanov family was not just the end of a dynasty, but a harsh symbol of the seismic shifts that were reshaping the world in the early 20th century. The Romanovs were gone, marking the end of an era. The fall of the Romanov dynasty was more than just a political event, it marked a profound shift in Russian society and culture. The consequences of the Romanovs' fall were far-reaching and transformative. The power vacuum left by their departure paved the way for a new political order, one that was drastically different from the autocratic rule of the Tsars. Vladimir Lenin, a shrewd and charismatic leader, seized the opportunity to establish a communist government, marking the start of an era that would redefine Russia's place in the world. The Bolshevik Revolution, led by Lenin, ushered in a period of civil war, a brutal and bloody conflict that would tear Russia apart for nearly 5 years. It was a time of profound uncertainty and chaos as the Red Army, the Communists, and the White Army, the Anti-Communists, vied for control of the nation. The outcome would determine the future of Russia and indeed, the whole world. The Civil War eventually ended with the victory of the Red Army. The once mighty Russian Empire was transformed into the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, the world's first communist state. This marked a new chapter in human history as the ideals of communism, equality and the abolition of private property, were put to the test on a scale never seen before. The Soviet Union, under its subsequent leaders, would go on to become a global superpower, leaving an indelible mark on the 20th century. It played a pivotal role in events such as the Second World War, the Cold War, and the space race. The impacts of the Romanovs' fall, therefore, extended far beyond Russia's borders, influencing the course of international relations and global politics. Indeed, the legacy of the Romanovs is not confined to their 300-year reign. Their fall, and the dramatic changes it precipitated, continues to reverberate through history. The fall of the Romanov dynasty was a seismic event that shaped the course of the 20th century, and its echoes can still be felt today.